Hi, and welcome to Steve Wraith's True Crime Podcast. Very special episode tonight. I'm joined by Kelly Massey. How are you, Kelly?
I'm okay, Steve. You?
Yeah, very good. Good to have you on. And obviously, we're going to talk about the book a little bit later. And we will be taking people's questions. A lot of people already tuning in to watch, which is nice. And a bit of family as well, which is always good to get a little bit of support, which is nice. So if you are watching this, guys, please like the broadcast and give it a share. We want as many people to watch this as possible. First of all, Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself and you know, where you grew up, where you were born, where you grew up.
Well, I was born in Salford at Salford Royal Hospital in 1982. I grew up in Broughton when I was young, in my young days, till I was around 8 years old in Lower Broughton, and then Higher Broughton. And then I moved to Salford precinct area when I was around 9, 10 with my Nana Rose because I ended up living with her permanently.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about, you know, those early days. What can you remember? What was your early memories of your dad, Paul?
Well, to me, my dad was just my dad. So I never really seen him as anything else. But as I was growing older and I went to high school, then, obviously kids would say things to us about our dad. So we would go home and ask our nana, why was kids saying stuff to us about our dad? And my nana just used to tell us because he had a lot of friends. So to us, we didn't really see him as like Paul Massey or Mr. Big. We just seen him as dad. So it was hard for us to portray him the way other people portrayed him because to us he was a caring gentleman. He done everything that a father should do for the child.
Describe what your dad was like for those who didn't get the chance to meet him. Was he, you know, did he like to have a laugh? Was he a family man? What kind of person was he?
Yeah, he was a prankster. He liked to play pranks on us all. We'd do anything for anyone. If we was in the wrong, we knew we was in the wrong. He disciplined us. Yeah, we couldn't step out of line. If we disrespected someone, that was it. My dad would have us because my dad wanted to keep his community a community where they all stuck together because that's what he loved. He loved his community and he loved his family. But if we done something wrong in that community, then we would be the first to be told off our dad. People probably thought we got away with stuff, but we didn't. He was very strict with us as children.
How many brothers and sisters do you have, Kelly?
I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
Big family then, big family. What was it? What was it like? Are you the youngest? Or are you in the middle? Or?
Well, Christopher's the eldest, and then Arlen's is the second eldest, and then there's me, and then there's our Stephen and my sister Lydia. I have another brother, but he's not my dad's.
Yeah, it's interesting. Big family. So, you know, a good sense of community. And you mentioned community there. Salford, of course, was where he was brought up, and you know his area. He was big on community, wasn't he? Did a lot for the local area.
When I was growing up, we had youth clubs and stuff like that. So my dad would, sponsor the football team, buy the football kits, try and help out where he could. He got involved in the community things. That's why it was hard, that people had him down as this bad person, because to us, he tried to help everybody he could.
Where did he get the reputation as a peacemaker? Because there's a lot of stories that I hear, and obviously I've jumped on board with yourself and your sister and Jack Gregory to help put this book out there and bring this book to life, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I stumbled across a story about an incident which he helped sort out in Sunderland, which is not far from where I live, to be fair. And he got involved. It's a story that's in the book, so I'm not going to go too much into detail. But he got involved between 2 warring factions, and he got them to shake hands and agree on a truce. So it wasn't just in his own backyard that he had this reputation, but he had it a little bit further afield. So where did he get that from, and how did that happen?
What it was with my dad just wanted everyone to be friends. He just wanted everyone to get on with each other. It makes the community a better place, which it does. But it don't always work that way that my dad always wanted it to go. But the peacemaker, it's just the person he was. He always tried to help anyone. When he spent all them years in prison, you know, most of my life. He helped all the people in prison. He never forgot about them people. So he was known for helping them people. And then on the outside in his own community, he helped anyone. He'd help the church with the Jamboree camp. He would help anyone at far and wide, you know, because my dad was known not just in Salford, he was known all over.
Yeah, certainly was. I mean, you know, and had a lot of friends up and down the country. I think my first introduction to who he was through Paul Ferris, of course, in well-known, you know, face from Glasgow, and you know, he's always spoke highly of your dad, and obviously he gave me a little bit of, you know, intro as to who he was. And I met up with your dad as well. He came to Newcastle when I was working on the doors of a nightclub in Newcastle. He was in there one night, and yeah, you know, at least I can say that I actually met him, and you know, I found him to be quite approachable, quite polite, and a nice guy. So, you know, it's an interesting story, which obviously around him. Let's talk a little bit about him running for mayor. You know, it's a story which, you know, it gets a lot of publicity. A lot of people talk about it, and people might find it a bit strange for somebody, you know, with a supposed reputation to actually run for mayor. And he did that in 2012.
Yeah, I think it just the reason he ran for mayor, myself personally, I think he just had enough of being a target from the police and the authorities. So he just thought, I'll be somebody then. So he went out and he started the campaign. He joined the campaign last minute. He's put his application in on the day the applications closed. And then he just ran a campaign. He hired the vans that were driving around Salford, people giving out leaflets. He done radio shows. He just wanted to make Salford a better place, and he believed that he was a person to do that job.
Yeah, and I mean, he came 7th out of 10. It wasn't a successful campaign, but he certainly went out and did the graft. He had support of the family and his friends. And you know, he took the.
He had a lot of support from the people who wasn't part of Salford, on the outskirts of Salford and further afield. But then people wasn't allowed to vote for my dad. So I believed if it was a nationwide vote, then he might have just won.
Yeah. You mentioned the Mr. Big title. I mean, he was given that title by City Councillor Joe Burrows, which was during a meeting in 1992, which was held to address the ongoing disturbances in Salford. It was a title which he didn't like. You know, a lot of people a lot of uneducated people tend to feel that he actually loved that title, you know.
He absolutely hated it. It made him cringe. But the Mr. Big title, the police and the authorities made that title that big that even my own dad couldn't control it, because his name was too big. And he used to sit there and he couldn't believe it, that people were actually believing all these things about him. And he'd put it on his Facebook that if people are saying stuff about me, contact me, please, because he couldn't get his head around this big Mr. Big label, that he was some big time gangster.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, you know, that kind of thing where the media, you know, team up against you, you know, alongside the police, it doesn't help, does it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't help. But he had a lot of good friends in the media as well who did, you know, try and help him along the way. You know, my dad did go to like barristers and solicitors to try and see what he could do about being targeted the way he was, because he wasn't allowed to live a normal life. He just wasn't. And there was nothing he could do. The barristers and the solicitors, they come back and said, because of who you are, Paul, there's nothing you can do. But my dad just wanted to try and live a normal life, but he was never allowed.
We always encourage questions on these kind of shows, and we've got a question in from Paul Oxley. Paul says, do people treat you differently now to when your dad was alive, Kelly?
I wouldn't really say so. People still are, you know, treat me how they treated me. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be the friends if people treated me differently. But I can understand the question. Yeah, people are different in the morals and the respect side of it, and just being there as a friend from my dad to his children. But that doesn't affect us. You know, we've had each other, me and my family. We've got through it, and that's all that matters. That's all that will matter to my dad now.
In the process of writing the book, we've talked a lot about his early life and what could have possibly set him off on this, this particular path that he chose. And I would say probably we both agreed that the death of his brother was something which caused severe trauma in his life, and he never really recovered from that, did he?
No, my dad, when he lost his brother Stephen, everyone in my dad's family, they'll say my dad changed because that night he was targeted by the police, and he'd never, ever, ever, go to someone who would tell a long story to and not tell him that story, because the police targeted him the night that his brother was killed, and he ended up, hitting a police officer, and then he got beat up, and then he got dragged away from his family. He got put in a bar stool, and it was made matters worse for not just for him, for me, my nana and granddad. They just lost a son, and then all of a sudden they're having another son dragged out of the hole.
Yeah, it's not nice at all. I mean, that kind of situation, as you say, can traumatize, a young person, and it seemed to set him off, on a life of crime. I hate to say it, but we've seen the convictions that he's had. He was, a criminal. He was into deception at times. He was, he was known for the odd spout of violence. But all in all, he wasn't a murderer. He wasn't a, he wasn't a full-time gangster. He was like we've said in the intro for the book. He was a dad. He was a granddad eventually.
Yeah.
And he did a hell of a lot for the community, didn't he?
Of course he did. My dad would laugh at the gangster title. He'd laugh at the Mr. Big, the Paul Nasser. All my dad would say to us is, I am me, I am Paul. And a lot of people who are watching this who know my dad, knows that that's what he would say, because he hated the Mr. Big title. It destroyed his life. It really did. And in the end, he got killed, and he never got to live a proper life because he spent most of his life in jail.
Before we come to, the horrific incidents of the 26th of July 2015, let's talk about, his previous prison sentences. He did get a couple of, lighter sentences, but unfortunately got caught up in a situation outside a nightclub in the 90s, 1999, and he was sentenced to 14 years in prison for stabbing a man in the groin. And it's actually a chapter which I'm working on at the moment, so it's something which I'm only really starting to get the grasps of what was going on. You kindly sent us up the depositions, so I've been going through them. But what was it like for you, as a young child, really, to grasp the fact that your dad wasn't coming home, first of all?
Well, it was obviously a horrible event for us as a family, because we was a close-knit family, like I said, and my dad was well known in the community. He was, highly respected, my dad, in the community in them days, back in the 90s. And I was only 14 when my dad got arrested. So, it was an hard time because I was in high school, and, people say nasty things about him and calling him names and stuff, and people putting stuff in the press and the papers, not leaving him alone, and the police coming to our nana's house, and not leaving the family alone. It basically destroyed our family. I never forget the day that he did get sentenced, because I was in my sister's house, and we was waiting for someone to come and tell us what had happened, because we was waiting for our dad to come home. And no one came. So I went to the phone box and I phoned home, my nana's house, and I spoke to my cousin Donna. And I could hear in the background loads of commotion, and I heard my granddad shouting, our Paul's just got 14 years. And I just froze. I flung the phone down. I ran so fast back to my sister's, and I told her the news, and she didn't believe me. So we waited to see if someone would come and tell us, and they did. They came, they took us to our nana's, and when we seen our nana that day, it was distraughting, because she was broken. She thought she'd die before he come out of prison.
A lot of people who end up getting a long sentence, end up separating from the family. But that couldn't have been further from the truth with your dad. What was it like to go and visit your dad?
Well, it was, we used to have to go on very far visits to visit our dad. It wasn't just your normal visit. You'd have to go on a lot of security checks. The police would have to come to our house to check it was us on our passports, do our fingerprints. This was at a young age, me and my sister. And then we'll go on visits to London. We'd we'd walk in the visit room, and then we'd have to go out of this visit room into another room where there was about 6 prisoners. That was, you'd sit at the table, you'd have cameras looking everywhere at you from above the table. And sometimes we went on visits, and our dad sent us home. He'd send us off the visit because of the people who were on the visits. Like, there could be sex offenders on the visit, and my dad would tell us to go because we were all girls. And once I did meet see Harold Shipman on a visit. And when I went on that visit, me and my sister, we couldn't take our eyes off him. We didn't speak to my dad. We just looked at Harold all the way through, thinking he's been on the telly, he's famous. That's what we was thinking about him, thinking he's a killer dad. And my dad's telling us to stop looking at him, and that night my sister had a dream about him, she said, that she had a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean,
it was hard going on the visits. It was hard to say goodbye to our dad every time that we went. It was even harder for our dad to say goodbye to us because we had done it from being very, very young children. I remember going on visits to see my dad when you could take money on a visit and you could take butties on a visit. My nanny used to take a packed lunch, and my dad would sit there and eat all his packed lunch, and he'd bring us gifts out, like the matchstick houses, what he made, money box ones for me and my sister. He'd bring them actually out on the visit, and we could take them off the visit. My nana would bring him trainers up on the visit and pass him on his visit. So, the days have changed from then to now because it got a lot stricter over the years. And like I said, we had to have a lot of security checks to see our dad.
Did your dad keep fit in prison? Was he somebody to keep in trim, and did he keep himself out of trouble? Because obviously, he was looking at 14 years for that sentence. But did he behave himself inside?
Yeah, I believe he did after the 14-year sentence. I believe that gave him the wake-up call that he actually needed for him to say it's this forever, or it's one way or the other. You behave and you can come home. But my dad, I think in the end, he just realised that it wasn't the life that he wanted. But once you have this Mr. Big title, it was quite hard for him to rub it off. He couldn't brush it off. There was no way the authorities were letting him, or the police. So it was a lot harder for him in prison, I believe, to behave, because of who he was. I believed he'd just become a target for a lot of people, because maybe in prison, we don't hear good stories about prison or what we see on the telly about him. So I don't believe he had an easy time in prison, but he got through it.
Paul Oxley, he's a regular on Newcastle United shows. He says Shipman was the best boxer ever to win a title. Apparently, he had a lethal jab. Dear me, how? Don't give up your day job, Paul. Yeah, I mean, when your dad actually came out of prison, he did change, didn't he? He got himself onto the legitimate ladder. He got involved in security companies, looking after a lot of the sites in Manchester, and obviously with a little bit of investment into a failed security company, he managed to set up PMS Security, which was turning over good money.
Yeah, well, when he come out of prison, he didn't just come home to 5 children. He had grandchildren, because when he first went to prison, he didn't have any grandchildren. So we didn't see any of our grandkids born. So when he come out, I think it just made him realise that he actually had a family there that had been waiting for him for all them years. And he did try to change. He, he'll tell us that what he was going to do, that he was going to run for mayor, and he was never going to go back to prison. And I did believe me dad, but the police never left him alone, and the authorities, they really didn't. Every time when he come out of prison, he booked an holiday to go away with his partner, to have a break, because he's been in prison for all them years. The police stopped that happening, so then he had to stay at home. Then the police just wouldn't leave him alone. They just wouldn't. It was very hard for him.
You mentioned him going away on holiday. He loved going to Wales, didn't he?
Oh, he loved Wales. It was his favourite place. That was his favourite place. That's where he found peace, in Wales.
Yeah, definitely a lovely part.
He has a lot of good friends in Wales as well.
Lovely part of the world. Paul's trying to take it down to football. Kelly, who did your dad support, United or City?
United. But my dad was a big football fan, but he never wanted to be a full, like, I think he just wanted to everyone to support each team, to be honest. But he was a big United fan.
Yeah, 100%. He loved it, and a lot of people obviously watching the show who knew that as well. Yeah, you said it was difficult because the police wouldn't give him an opportunity to settle. It was almost as if they were willing him into doing something wrong, and ultimately
they wanted him to do something wrong. That's what they wanted. They wanted him to do something wrong so they could send him away for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But my dad wasn't going to let that happen. That's why he was trying to make a change by running for mayor, and trying to make a difference in life. Yeah.
Obviously had a situation which was developing in Manchester, though. It got the title of Gunchester. There was wars, breaking out between different gangs from different areas. I mean, as a youngster growing up, obviously coming into your teens, is that something that you were aware of?
Oh yeah, I was aware of that title, of course, because I was, I was in Salford. That's where I lived. So all the kids around there, we was a close knit community. We was all friends. So that image as a kid, people, laughed at it. It was, something that people would say to you when you say where you're from, Manchester. So they'll say Gunchester. So it's not something you could have hid from anyway. That title.
Were you aware of your dad's involvement in trying to, mediate between the two different gangs who were going hammer and tongs at trying to rub each other out?
No, I wasn't aware of any of it. My dad just wanted everyone to be friends, like I said, and that's probably what he was trying to do with everybody, just make them all to be friends, so everyone got along with each other. Because that's the kind of man he was. He was community spirited, like I said, and he wanted to help his community. There's no way he would cause a war upon his community. There's no way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Paul says hard to control these gangs that don't care who they stab with a knife, and of course it was guns back in those days. A lot of people agreeing. Mike says his secret wish was to buy Cardiff City one day, as it was in his ancestry. Is that true?
Oh, I'm not sure. He'll know more than me. He's a good friend.
Thanks. Cheers for that, Mike. I mean, obviously we're come towards that fateful day, which changed your life and your family's life forever. The 26th of July, 2015, and an ordinary day, really, wasn't it? Your dad had been away on on a
he was
break,
on holiday. Yeah, when he got killed, we all thought he was still in Wales, to be honest. I didn't find out till the following day on the Monday, because I was away camping. I got the phone call saying that your dad's been shot and he's dead. I just jumped in my car. I was 3 hours away from home and never drove so fast to get home. I didn't care if the police pulled me. I would have told him I need to see my dad. I got home and I just wanted to see my dad. I didn't believe what anyone was telling me until I see my dad's body. And that day was the worst day of my life, because like I say, as growing up as a child and people saying stuff to us over the years, it made me worry about my dad. It made me have a fear that one day something bad was going to happen to him. And then when I got that phone call telling me that my dad's been shot and he's dead, all my fears become real. So now I feel like I don't hold any fear, because how can you when you've feared something all your life and then it actually happens? Because I feared that he'd be shot one day, and he was. Because of who he was.
Your dad felt that way as well, didn't he? I think he always felt that was potentially, how it was going to end for him.
He used to say it to us. He used to tell us to our faces as kids and say, if anything ever happens to me, I just want you to carry on with your life, because he knew the consequences. Obviously we weren't looking at the consequences at the time, but we're living the consequences now.
How was he in the build up to to that? Was he all right? Was in himself, or was the pressure of the police being on his case? Was that all getting to him? He'd obviously been arrested. They were trying to find financial irregularities within the security company. They were withholding money.
They took everything off my dad. And my dad ended up not being able to spend £1 because he had to prove how he spent it. And that's how you're going to break a man. you know, you're going to target a man, and then you're going to take all his finance off him, and then you're not going to let him spend anything and freeze all his accounts, then you are going to break a man. And it put him under that much pressure that it was showing that he had problems in his personal life, you know, because when you go out and you've got to portray yourself as this person, then you have to put on a different face. But when you've got all these problems going on, you can't hide them. You can't hide it. You just can't. It's impossible to hide when you've got someone breaking you and breaking you and breaking you all the time. And the police knew they was breaking him. But my dad was not letting that happen. So he was fighting back. He was telling him he was going to sue him and he was going to prove that he was doing nothing wrong, which he wasn't. And when he died, about a year later, the police cleared him of all money laundering charges. So what did they destroy my dad for? You know, because they destroyed him. They broke him. They made him weak. They made him vulnerable to the people in the community because, you know, things were getting, you know, hard in the community as times were going by, and the world's changing. It's completely changing to when I was a child.
Yeah, I think Sean probably is saying what a lot of people watching this would want to say to you, and that's, well, he's never heard about him personally, but it's nice to hear the stories. Chin up and be proud. Jody, sorry, says your dad will be so proud of you all, Kelly, which is really nice. Obviously, following on, you know, the next few days, I can imagine you would have just been, you know, just in a daze, you know what I mean? Constantly
Well,
upset.
my first thing I done was contacted 999 and asked to speak to someone in charge of my dad's murder. And they put an officer on the phone called Mark. I demanded I wanted to see my dad's body. So the officer told me that my dad was in the morgue. So I drove straight to Salford Royal with my sister to Salford Royal's morgue. We went in the waiting room and my dad wasn't there. They said that he wasn't here. So next minute, a lady come out and got me on the telephone. She said there was a man on the phone to speak to me. So I got the telephone and it was the same officer, Mark. And he said that I could go and see my dad, but he was in Oldham, in the morgue in Oldham. So he arranged for us to go and see him the next day. So me and my sister went to see my dad the next day, you know, and that was the worst day of my life, basically, because that's when it became real to me that my dad was really dead and it was really him, you know. But he looked perfect, you know, even though it was the circumstances it was. I just seen his face, that's all I could see. And he just looked fast asleep to me. You know,
Yeah,
but I couldn't look at him. I just couldn't look. When I noticed his hair, I just covered my face and I was screaming, I'm sorry, because I was sorry because I knew my dad wouldn't want me to see him like that. You know, and so I was sorry that I had to see him like that.
Is that a regret really of yours that you saw him like that? Would you not? Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say now. At the time, it probably felt the right thing to do.
I have to do it. It's something I have to do because I won't believe that anyone that my dad was dead. Everyone who told me, I said, why have you seen him? Have you seen him? And they was all saying, no, but it's him. And I'm saying, well, I will believe it when I see him. And as soon as I walked in that room, I just noticed his hair. I didn't even see his face, and I just knew it was him. I just couldn't look.
Paul's talking about.
I don't regret it, no.
No, it's okay. Paul Oxley's asking the question, what do you make of the police celebrating Paul's death? Of course, that was something that was reported in the newspapers, and obviously there was a direct quote as well from somebody to say that they said it was kebabs all round, I think they said, wasn't it?
Well, I think that's something that was expected, wasn't it, for them all to celebrate his death after the life that they gave him. Come on, they never left him alone. From me being born, my dad was in prison. So to the police, someone done their job for him, but no one understands how hard it really is to have faith in the police when they destroyed your dad. You know, it's hard because I had to have faith in the police to get me justice when they destroyed my dad. And basically, I believe he was where he was because they broke him bit by bit.
Yeah, Cameron's saying, obviously, when you saw him, did you think that the police did it to him?
Well, when I first saw him, I was thinking all sorts because people were throwing names all over Salford. telling us all sorts of names. People were getting us on meetings, telling us that friends had killed our dad and stuff like that, and it was all wrong what people were trying to do. But I wasn't being brainwashed that easily. At the end of the day, whoever killed our dad was going to be caught for it, because you can't go around killing people and get away with it. It just doesn't happen. And especially when you kill someone with a title like Mr. Big.
Well, this is it, and I'm just showing the newspaper cover there, and I mean, once again, even in death, they still couldn't, give him his proper title. They still insisted on Mr. Big because let's face it, that sells newspapers. That's what people want to read. They want to think of him as a big godfather.
The media are as bad as the police. They really are. The media, like the story about the police celebrating with kebabs that was in the paper. I didn't give the police the papers that story. They took that off Facebook, and they shouldn't be allowed to do stuff like that, because I didn't give them permission to do that. And yeah, someone did tell us the police celebrated with kebabs, but that's something that's going into our book, not for something for the newspaper to snoop on my Facebook and take away and then make a big story about it and put my name all over it. That's unfair. Because then what they're trying to do the same to me as what they done to my dad.
As things progressed, I mean, but before the funeral, did you have an idea of who might have done this? Was were the family thinking, that's who it was?
I got told names from the day I got home. From the day I got home, I got told names, and the name I was told was a person who got charged and sent to prison for the rest of his life for it.
Okay, and let's talk about the funeral. I mean, it was one of the biggest funerals I think that Salford and Manchester has ever seen. Well attended. Funerals are there for you to hopefully get your grief out. A lot of grief was shed over your dad from a lot of people, but no more so than the family. What was that day like for you?
Well, that day it was like being in another world. To be honest, we didn't know what was happening, whose funeral we was at, because it didn't feel real. To be honest, the streets were lined with people. These people were waving to us in the cars, and we was thinking, what do we do? Wave back? Because we didn't even know how to react to it, because it was like he was like a king or something of Salford, because the streets went in uproar. The band echoed through the streets. The car horns were beeping all through the streets. The noise through the streets was amazing. To hear that noise at your own dad's funeral, it was like our dad was really, really, really loved, because he was.
Yeah. At the funeral, John Kinsella was there, alongside a lot of other faces. Paul Ferris, who I mentioned earlier, was there, and there was an incident, wasn't there, at the funeral, which of course was widely reported.
Yeah. Well, it was sad circumstances that something like that really happened at our dad's funeral, because we didn't need any more stress on that day. We was already under pressure. We was living in fear, because to be at a funeral that big without our dad stood there was scary. We was used to standing in crowds like that with our dad by our sides, and then for people that situation to make matters worse, it was scary. I didn't even stay at my dad's funeral all night, because I couldn't. I felt too ill. I was scared. I wanted to go home.
The police didn't seem to be getting anywhere. You say you had an idea of who it was pretty much straight away, but the police seemed to be at a loss. Certainly hadn't made any inroads into making any arrests. And then John Kinsella, who I've just mentioned was a good friend of your dad's, he was gunned down in Liverpool.
Yeah, it's only when John Kinsella was killed that we finally got justice for our dad. Not long before John was killed, I'd say 2 weeks before John was killed, I did go on a meeting to meet CPS to tell me about the charges on my dad's case. And there was a 12-month delay, and I had a breakdown. I had a meltdown. I was on the phone to the coroner. I was screaming at the police officers that they was glad my dad was dead, and and it made me really have a mental breakdown that day. And I phoned the coroner telling her she was a liar, calling CPS liars, because after 3.5 years to hear there's going to be another 12-month delay, it killed me inside, because to them it was just a job. To me, it was real life. I had to live this every day. And you know, I didn't feel like nothing was being done. I was telling them, you need to get us justice. You know, where do we go from here? Because our lives couldn't move forward until we had some answers for our dad's murder, because we didn't know nothing except for what people were telling us on the streets. And I never wanted to believe anyone who's told me stuff on the streets, because if it was from everyone's point of view, everyone would have killed me dad.
Yeah. The death of John Kinsella was obviously connected to your dad's shooting, and arrests followed. Mark Fellows was arrested and charged in 2018. How did the family feel when the arrests took place?
I couldn't believe it. I was actually on holiday when I got the phone call that the arrest had been made. But at first, they couldn't tell us the person's name that had been arrested. So, you know, we all had to wait in anticipation for like 2 days before they phoned us back and give us the names. And then when I heard Mark's name, I was just relieved that he was off the streets and that he'd been caught for what he had done. Because at the end of the day, the sentence that Mark got was the best sentence that could be handed to a murderer who goes out, kills our dad, and then goes along and kills another man. You can't go around doing things like that. You know, it's unfair. What about the families that are left suffering, like ourselves? You know, you can't live with no answers to your dad's murder. You can't.
Stephen Boyle, of course, was arrested as well. And I think what shocked me the most, because as I say, I was fairly new to this story until I started working on the book with you and Jack, was that, essentially these were childhood friends of yours, from the same precinct.
I knew both. Yeah, I knew both of them. Stephen Boyle, I went to school with Stephen Boyle. I sat in the same class as Stephen Boyle, sat next to him. I had not seen Stephen Boyle for over 20 years. And when I walked in court the first day that I seen him, he started trying to talk to me. He's saying, Kelly, I swear this is not me. I've not done this. And the judge asked him to stop talking to the public gallery. But I was shocked, because I thought, I've not seen this guy for 20 years. And now he's pleading his innocence to my dad's murder tonight. You know, and straight away, I knew that they had done something, because you wouldn't do that to someone, you know, after all them years that they've waited for justice, and then for you to walk in a court and them start pleading their innocence straight away directly to you. It was just sickening, to be honest.
Tell us what
the childhood friends could do this.
Tell us what the trial was like for the family, because I believe that you attended every day, more or less.
I attended every day, yeah. I couldn't miss a day of anything that we went through with my dad. The trial was the worst thing ever for our family. We had our ups and downs, you know, we nearly had fights, we had arguments, we all sat away from each other, you know, because of the stress and the pressure of, you know, of what was happening. And then from the trial, I don't really feel like I got any answers. I feel like all I got from the trial was the injuries my dad suffered. So it was traumatizing, because I got promised we'll be hearing the 999 call about our dad. So we went on and we listened to Wendy's 999 call from when John was shot. And then when it come to our dad, they read it out on a transcript. And I've never been so traumatized in my life, because my dad's saying his postcode, he's been shot, and his postcode of his address, and the guy saying back, Preston. And me and my brother and my sister, we all walked out. We couldn't cope listening to it anymore, because our dad was lying dead and this guy saying Preston, and it just sounded too clear. We would rather have heard it on the tape than for someone to read it out, because I was there to face the truth.
I mean, for me, that's strange, isn't it? That that they chose not to play it. I mean, they've got it there. It's also, it almost feels as if they're still conspiring against them, even in death.
Of course, yeah. And then they promised that they asked me to do a victim impact statement to be read out at the end of the trial. And it took me a long time to prepare for this, you know, and build my courage up to put my feelings on a piece of paper. I done it. I give it to the police. They passed it off. They give it to the courts, and it never even got read out. I never even got to stand up, because I asked, could I stand up and say the impact statement directly to the people? who were responsible for my dad's murder, because obviously I grew up with these people. So I wanted them to know the real impact that it's had on all our lives, not just mine, my whole families, my dad's, all my dad's other kids, his sisters, his brothers. It's destroyed us all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrific thing. One can only imagine, the situations that you've all been through, the emotional roller coaster that you've been on as well. So let's go to, the day that the jury came forward and gave the actual verdict on the trial.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, when we were called back into court that day, and the jury came back, and the guy who says the verdict stood up, and as he said Mark Fellows his name, I just seen G come off his lips before it even got said to say guilty. And as soon as he said guilty, me and my sister Lindsay, we just got up and ran out the court, and we just ran separate ways in the waiting room, and they had all these armed police waiting outside, and I think we confused the armed police a bit. I think they thought they got away with killing our dad, because we were that shocked. We were shouting across to each other, what happened then? What actually happened then? Because we both couldn't deal with the emotion that we had just said, what we had just said in the court. So then the police, our family liaison officer Ashley, she came out after us, and she just burst out crying, the liaison officer, she just put her arms around me, and she said, "I'm so happy that you've finally got justice."
And the sentencing, obviously, again, it's something which a lot of people probably fear more than the actual verdict, because you're never quite sure, how a judge is going to sum things up. You would like to think that a life means a life, and that person's never going to get out. But there's been a lot of situations which have seen people get ridiculous sentences for that kind of thing. But, did you feel like justice had been done, Kelly?
Definitely with the sentence, yeah. Because, how could you get a worse sentence than that? You couldn't. But I think he deserved the sentence for, doing what he done, not just to my dad, but to John as well. He's destroyed a lot of families. It's destroyed a lot of families in the community. It destroyed a lot of people when our dad was killed. It broke a lot of people.
Obviously, you have to face them when you're in court. And again, only anyone who's been through that can know what that's like. What kind of reaction were you getting off Fellows, during those visits to court?
Fellows didn't show no reaction whatsoever. He was blank. There was no feelings. There was no look in his eye. He was cold. But Stephen Boyle, his eyes were all over the public gallery. He couldn't keep his eyes shut. He just kept looking over, trying to let on to us all. And when where they were stood, they were like sideways from us. So I was like, I couldn't take my eyes off them both all the way through the court. I didn't really look at the judge, but then the police told me I wasn't allowed to look at him. So me and my brother Stephen said, well, that's a bit unfair, because this is what we're here for, to face the people who killed our dad. But we were being told we wasn't even allowed to look at these people. But I still looked at them anyway, because at the end of the day, the worst that could have happened was the police could have threw me out the trial, and that won't, that wouldn't have affected me, because I don't feel like I got any answers from the trial anyway, just the injuries that my dad suffered.
Obviously, Fellows, as you would expect, launched an appeal, but it was unsuccessful. Subsequently now, we've heard of incidents happening in prison where, they've been attacked. I mean, what's your reaction when you hear that kind of news? Are you happy that kind of thing's gone on in prison, or does it not? Do you think
I wouldn't say I'm happy. I don't get a satisfaction out of anything like that. I just think, well, that's the life he chose to live. Then that's what happens in prison. We all read about what happens in prison and see what happens in prison. So if he chose to pick up that gun that day and take our dad out, and then John, then that's the life he chose to live. That's all I can say. It's his choice, not mine.
Yeah, hopefully we're going to be joined by Jack Gregory. I've seen he's joined the broadcast, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be able to get him up for a picture. Let's talk about the book for the last 15 minutes, and we'll bring Jack in when he joins us. Why have you chosen to do a book, Kelly?
It wasn't really a choice or part of a plan to do a book after the trial. I was just trying to get on with my life, and then a book was coming out called The Mr. Big, and then I got contacted by a book writer, which is Jack, that's coming on now, and he asked if I wanted to write a book. So we come up with the idea that because of the Mr. Big book, and I did see what was inside the Mr. Big book, which was shocking, the things that were being said about my dad. So I decided to take part of the book because I didn't want people to have my dad portrayed like that. I wasn't letting people think that that's the type of man my dad was. So me and Jack got together and we started asking people, would they tribute into our book to show if the real Paul Massey? Because, with all these people, if this Mr. Big book portrays our dad as this big time drug dealing gangster, then all these people that we've asked for tributes for would be saying the same. So it was a way of making an example of the Mr. Big book at first. But, I've really been enjoying doing the book, and I think it's a great honour to my dad, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Jack's having a few technical issues, but we will get him on if he gets on. There he is there. Jack, can you hear us? No, he's struggling, I think, a little bit. Can you hear us, Jack?
I think he's got his earphones.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good stuff.
Welcome.
Yeah, good stuff. Welcome, Jack. We're just talking a little bit about the book to finish off the interview.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Tell us a little bit about the tributes side of things, Jack, if you can.
Hang on.
We'll let him get settled. Are you there, Jack? He's muted his mic.
I think he's lost connection.
He has, yeah. He's struggling a little bit. We'll bring him in if we can when he comes back. Yeah, I mean, the tribute side of it is good. I mean, look, for those people who are watching who've already pre-ordered, we're not going to put a definite release date on this yet because it's got to be right, the book. It's taken a bit of time to get the book right, and essentially you're doing a bit, Kelly, I'm doing a bit, Jack's doing a bit, and I think from our perspective, it's all, we know what we're doing, we've got our game plan. What are you wanting people to get out of this book, just to discover the real Paul Massey?
I just want them to know the real Paul Massey, and the man that I actually knew, and the people that actually knew my dad, who when they're giving their stories, then my dad deserves to. When my dad died, he deserves to die with dignity. I'm not letting some man ruin whatever title my dad built up, because I'm not going to let that happen, because my dad was a respectful man. He was very well respected in his own area, and you can't let someone slander someone when it's not even true. So the right thing to do is to stand up against the Mr. Big book and do our own.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been thoroughly enjoyable for me to get to know the real Paul Massey, and to read read some of the stuff that Jack had already put together was fascinating. Obviously, my research and then going on to speak to different people has been interesting. I've read through Peter Walsh's book, which is fascinating. If anybody hasn't read that, it's well worth a read. Tells you the history of the A to Z of Manchester and the whole Gunchester stuff, which is fantastic. Mike Adam, who's been a big help, with me, can always pick the phone up and speak to him and have a chat with him about Paul, which he's got some fascinating stories, and he's lived a hell of a life himself, it's got to be said. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story, and I think from our perspective, I think we will do your dad proud. And I think you've got to accept, Kelly, I think that because of the reputation that your dad had, whether it was one that he earned or one that he was given. He lived an interesting life, and I think you will find that there will be people who will always try and capitalize on that and try and make money out of it. So the Mr. Big book, I know it's going to be there. We know it's going to come out, and it'll be interesting to see what stories are in it. You say you've already seen some of the stuff that's in it, but I think what people have to realize is our book is more of a it's more of a tribute. Yes, there's going to be stories in an A to Z of Paul's life, but essentially it's going to tell the truth, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Jack's in again. Are you there, Jack? I feel like a spiritualist every time I say it. Are you there? Is anybody there? Yeah, Jack's internet's not giving it. I don't think it's not working out. Sadly, unfortunately, I will give him one last shot if I can. Is there anything else you want to say, Kelly? Just with regards to with regards to the book and with regards to your dad.
Well, I just want to say that the only reason I'm doing the book is because of the Mr. Big book. It wasn't part of a plan. It's just something that's come along the way. But I am really enjoying doing the book because it's about getting my emotions onto a piece of paper and helping me deal with the loss of my dad. Because for the full 5 years, I've never been able to grieve for my dad. Nothing's been private. Everything's been in the media. Everything about my dad before we've even known was in the media. So it's nice now to start doing things that my own way, in my own little private way, because it does, even though we're going to be putting it out to the public, it feels like it's private at the minute because it's the only bit of privacy we've been able to have.
Yeah, I mean, we've just gone past an anniversary. I presume the anniversaries just don't get any better. And I mean, I think I told you when we first spoke, the day of your dad's death is actually my wedding anniversary. And I remember hearing about your dad's shooting when I think I was in Liverpool that weekend with my wife. But yeah, I mean, they don't get any easier, do they?
No, I've not celebrated my dad's anniversary for 2 years now because I just don't choose to celebrate it. I just find it the most hardest day of my life, to be honest. When it comes to the 26th of July, even though I didn't know he was dead, I just don't want to face that day. So for the last 2 years, I've not celebrated it with my family or anything. I've just stayed on my own because that's what I choose to do now. Because I just don't see it as a celebration.
No, definitely not. And as I say, every year brings around different anniversaries, birth dates and stuff like that. It's that's what happens, unfortunately, with these kind of situations, isn't it?
And as each year passes by, things haven't got easier. Things have always got harder. Where people say with time it gets easier, but it doesn't. With my dad, things have just got totally harder. Like, it's been 5 years now. People still message us on Instagram, saying nasty things about him. And it's like, please just let us move on with our lives, because all we're trying to do now is move forward with our lives and do our dad proud.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that you and the family have done your dad proud, and I think this book will go a long way to doing that. And I think sadly we're not going to get Jack on, but Jack's been very helpful to the family. I know he's helped you massively, and some of the tributes he's got were quite remarkable. I think just to name a few names without going into detail about what they've put in the book, Bruce Jones, of course, who was very had a long run, a long stint in Coronation Street, playing Les Battersby. Got Peter Hook, of course, who was involved with New Order and the Hacienda, which is a club that your dad used to frequent quite a bit back in the day. Yeah, so I mean, amazing to see that. Bez from the Happy Mondays, he's done a little bit of the book as well. So Jack's really done well getting those kind of tributes in, hasn't he?
And it's been very hard to get people to tribute to our book, even though, people think that people will jump at the chance because it's Paul's family asking, but it's not been that easy. A lot of people hold a lot of fear to say anything into the book, because when it comes to talking about my dad, people just don't want to talk about him.
Jack, I'm not sure if you can hear us, mate. We'll try again. Can you hear us, mate? No, Jack, not having much success, mate, unfortunately. We might have to try again with with you at some point, not having much joy with them. But yeah, you say some people don't want to get involved. I mean, can you expand on that, Kelly? Can you tell us why? Is it?
I just think people have a lot of fear. I think they think that they'll get repercussions if they've said something wrong, or are they saying the right or wrong thing? I think it's more because my dad was killed and it was round a war. Then obviously it's going to scare people. You know, it terrified us when we first got told our dad had been killed, and then the police are portraying that it was gangs and wars. And to us, we was like, "What you on about? It was our dad. He didn't mix with with gangs. He was a 55-year-old man. He's not. He wasn't that type of man anymore. He was just someone who wanted to just get on with his life, try and live a normal life, but he wasn't allowed to. So everything was complicated for him, really complicated."
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think from our point of view with this book, it's it's not an insight into the gang wars of Manchester. It's an insight into the life of Paul Massey, and I think that's the key. I think whatever is in the other book, and whatever comes out of other books moving forward, it'll always be that situation where people will want to write about your dad. This is from the family's perspective, and I think
our dad didn't speak to us about gangs or anything like that. So there's nothing for us to be able to say about anything like that, because that's not what I believe in with it all at the end of the day, because my dad didn't mix with gangs. It's what the police have betrayed, because the police have targeted our dad all his lives, and in the end he was killed, not by the police, but at the end of the day it was very hard for us as a family to just have faith in the police and the justice system. It really was.
Kelly, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure we'll do something else with you and maybe some more members of the family as things progress. As I say, we haven't got a release date for the book yet. Ideally, would love to have it out for Christmas this year, but we don't really want to promise that unless and build everyone's hopes up. I think we'll both agree today, potentially, if we can both carry on the same work rate, we'll have it out for January. But we do want to thank everybody, don't we, who's so far put a pre-order in, because it shows immense faith in the fact that we're going to have a really good book coming out.
Well, it makes me just see that people are really interested in reading the truth. That's what it makes me see, because at the end of the day, everyone wants to know the truth, what happened, and it's about time that the truth was spoken.
Great stuff. We're going to finish off with the advert really for the book again. Kelly Massey, been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.